Hey, I'm Josh. Last summer I made a video about taking my kids to a medieval fair, and we had a lot of fun at that particular event, and so I was keeping an eye out for when it would show up again this summer. And I wasn't sure I was going to make it this year because even though they do 7 locations around southern Ontario on different weekends, there's only a couple of them that are within a relatively easy driving distance of us. And the other thing is, for some reason they do pretty much all of these weekends in May and June and one in September. They don't do any in July or August. I assume that the fairgrounds and the locations that they get to host the festival are booked up for the summer, and that's maybe why they're doing it in the spring, but a lot of them are still happening during the school year. However, Evan brought up just a week or so ago the fact that he really enjoyed it last year and was hoping we could do it again this summer. So I did some rearranging of my schedule with the kids' mother so that I could take them to the, which one was this called? This was the Headwaters Medieval Faire, located in the fairgrounds outside of Orangeville, Ontario. We went there on Sunday, June 29th, and had a really good time. Wyatt said that he was very anxious to get back to it again as well. One thing he likes to do is a little bit of cosplay, come up with a bit of a fantasy medieval type costume and show up in costume. So last year he did this sort of medieval king costume. This year he went as a tiefling warrior, and the thing is, though, he had an injury, so Wyatt sprained his ankle and was on crutches, and I thought, well, maybe we could incorporate that into your costume, using the old trope of an adventurer taking an arrow to the knee. So I took a sort of hard shell knee pad and I drilled a hole through it, stuck a dowel through it, made an arrow, and so forth. So we incorporated that into his tiefling costume so that he could be a tiefling who took an arrow to the knee. And there were several other people who had dressed up mostly in various medieval inspired outfits, a couple of fantasy type ones. There was this absolutely spectacular costume that I heard somebody say they had actual fans inside the costume to keep them cool. It was a very hot day, so I mean, it wasn't raining, which was nice, but it was definitely very sunny and hot. But we timed it so that we could show up shortly before noon and catch one of the jousting events that they were holding at the fair there. We picked up some popcorn from the popcorn stand and got some seats in the stands in front of the main sort of jousting area. They were just finishing up a birds of prey demonstration, so we got to hear a guy talk a little bit about these giant birds who helped these medieval people hunt for food. And then they started the joust, which was definitely the highlight of last year. This year it was, I guess, still the main event of the fair, but it was not nearly as good as last year, because last year at the event we went to, we did go to a different location last year as well. We went to the one outside of Ancaster near Hamilton. This time we were near Orangeville. But last year they had 4 nights that were paired off to do jousting runs. So they did, I think, six jousts each for 12 of them last year. This year they only had 2 knights who did their 6 passes, so we only got half as much jousting as last year. Evan did appreciate, though, that this time it was outdoors, because that last year they were at the indoor fairgrounds for the jousting section of it, and between the horses and the straw, his allergies and mine were really acting up. But this one was just more in an open field, which was kind of nice. The 2 nights they had one fellow who came all the way up from Mexico City. He was the guy with the glorious mane of long dark hair, and he was jousting a guy from the US. I think they might have said he was from Colorado. I'm not exactly sure where in the US he was from. But they did their 6 passes, and it wasn't as good as last year. Last year we had a couple of guys who were actually unhorsed during the jousting, and so that made it pretty exciting. This year they didn't seem to be quite as much on target. We had a good MC who was calling the action and encouraging the crowd participation and whatnot.
Our lances are 11 foot long, and they are not scored, cut, or tampered with in any type of way. So every time they hit each other, it is actually with a full stick of wood. They're crazy.
But on the first pass between the two knights, we had one guy with a dropped lance, so he must have made some kind of connection. On the second pass, they had a solid hit, and one guy broke a lance on his opponent, so that was a nice, good, solid hit. On the third pass, we had another dropped lance. The fourth pass was the worst one. It was a complete whiff. Both of them seemed to totally miss. The fifth one was another broken lance, so another solid hit with the fifth pass there. And then on the sixth and final one, we had one lance go flying. It didn't actually break, but he made contact with his opponent hard enough that the lance went flying. So, you know, it was still really fun to watch the jousting, although it wasn't as exciting, like I said, as last year. It was a bit of a letdown to have that whole event cut in half. Now, the next event on the schedule was at the exact same location, so we got to hang out in the stands a bit longer. And this was touted as a Trebuchet demonstration, and I will now show you the entirety of the Trebuchet show.
And there you are, medieval fruit salad.
I managed to miss the climax of the Trebuchet show of the watermelon striking the ground and shattering into pieces. But apparently we got a better show than the morning Trebuchet show, where apparently the watermelon went pretty much straight up and straight back down again, and maybe a few feet forward. So that was the Trebuchet show. I mean, for much better Trebuchet action, you gotta watch Todd Cutler's YouTube channel. He does some pretty amazing stuff with a genuine Trebuchet. It's pretty awesome.
Well, that worked! Hurrah! At last! Should be burning radially now. Oh, and here it comes! Oh, yes! Oh, yes! That could not have been better. Absolutely, look at this. This is exactly what I wanted. Multiple fires, multiple places. It's just, oh, and have a look at it. And it's not just a fiery fire. Check that out.
So after that, we left the stands area and we went and wandered all the booths that were selling various trinkets, arms and armor, various handmade crafts, foam weapons, all kinds of different things that you might expect to see at a Renaissance fair or a medieval fair. We did pick up some cool things. I am extremely grateful to my Patreon supporters that they allow me the opportunity to spoil my boys a little bit at events like this. And I did spend most of my money on my boys, but I did get myself a few little things. I got this light switch cover that was a handmade thing from some kind of acrylic medium or something like that. And then I got these two little pins that I could pin onto my hat or my jacket, and that was what I treated myself to this year. Last year I had picked up this banner and this little crocheted Grim Reaper fellow. But yeah, that's what I picked up this year. So after we had wandered around most of the booths, the boys went to sit and watch an aerial acrobat do a performance on those long dangly ribbons things where they wrap themselves in the ribbons and flip around and do cool stuff. And while they were doing that, I went to the food trucks and got myself some jerk chicken tacos for lunch and some fudge for dessert, which was quite a nice treat. And then after that, because Wyatt had quite limited mobility on his crutches, he wasn't up for doing a ton of wandering around, so they weren't super interested in doing some of the other activities like the archery or the axe throwing or the whipper-snapper activities. I mean, Wyatt did have limited mobility, plus it was just so hot. Like, I mean, I'm not going to complain that it was a nice sunny day because it could have been rainy and miserable, but it was definitely very warm. So we weren't feeling super activity energized. So at that point, Wyatt just found a patch of grass to sit down and drink a slushie, while Evan and I checked out the remaining booths and picked up a couple of little souvenirs for Evan. And we decided to call it a day at that point. We certainly didn't check out as many of the shows as we did last year, like the little comedy shows and whatnot that they had, but we did have a really good time until I got in a car and fired up the car's mapping system to find us a route home, because it was generally going to be these winding country roads to get us back to where we live. So I was just following my car's mapping route, and I should know better, because this friggin' mapping system always takes me on the most ridiculous routes home, and I should know by now not to trust it for anything more than very short routes within my city where I live here. But before I knew it, I found out we were in Brampton, Ontario, which, if you know Southern Ontario, I was trying to get from Orangeville to Cambridge. And so Orangeville to Cambridge is southwest. It took me from Orangeville to Brampton, which is southeast. I think its idea was it was going to take me onto the 407 toll highway and get me to take the toll highway home. I'm like, no, I'm not going to pay on a highway to get home. So I then took over and went all the way back to where we were supposed to go, and it was a long and frustrating drive home after a hot day of the Medieval Fair. But that aside, we did have a very enjoyable day. The boys did talk about making this an annual tradition, which is something that I'm very excited to keep doing, because it's just really fun to watch the jousting in particular, and some of the other entertainment events. It's fun to wander the booths and see what cool stuff people have for sale, and it's just a great day out. Of course, Wyatt likes to dress up too, so that's a fun part for him. What events do you have going on this summer? Are you getting out to anything fun? I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear if you're getting out to a medieval fair or a Renaissance festival in particular, or even some kind of LARPing event. All that stuff is things that I'm curious about and would love to hear about, so please do let me know, and thank you so much for watching. Cheers.
That's the thing, yeah. When it's not just me, I'm not just hearing it from Metal, it's not just one of my videos, it's not just one of my friends' videos, it's YouTube sucks.
Hey, I'm Josh. We went there but we timed it so that we could show up before noon to catch the first jousting event of, well, I sat in the stands by the big, the second one, yeah, there was, the boys did, Evan did talk